the first resident recruitment and selection presentation with Holly from Kern Urban Teacher Residency.
Good morning, everybody. I've gotten to meet a few of you guys in the breakout rooms, but I'm Holly Gonzalez. I coordinate the Kern Urban Teacher Residency, and that is a partnership between Cal State University Bakersfield and Bakersfield City School District. So that's a little bit about the context of what I'm sharing today. To go a bit deeper, I don't have any slides on our contextual information, but we are the 20th of the 23 CSUs. I work on the IHE side, but also consult for the LEA. We actually have 7 teacher residencies in our multiple single programs. So I direct that consortium of residencies, but my main work is coordinating the Kern Urban Teacher Residency, again, who's in partnership with Bakersfield City Schools. So that's the lens that I'll tell the story from today. Big disclaimer, like I'm here to learn with you guys and learn from you guys. So this is just a story to tell and share about how we are recruiting resident teachers currently and working through the process of refining that work and doing important equity work to adjust and revise along the way also. As I chat, I challenge you, if you have sticky notes, maybe grab 2. I'm going to talk about sort of 2 buckets of things, or grab a piece of paper, or if you prefer digital, you could do a T-chart. My teacher brain is on. I'll talk about recruiting resident teachers and then the selection process and really digging into that. And my hope is your takeaway can be some things that you notice that we're doing, but also things that maybe you wonder or have questions about, or things that you'd like more information so that you can start embedding practices in what you're doing, or maybe you can share with me things that you're doing that we can begin doing. So that's my context piece, but let's jump right into the idea of recruiting resident teachers. So it is busy work, and it's getting the right information to the quote unquote right people. And I put right in quotation marks in regards to people because sometimes the information can pass through the eyes of people who don't know they want to be a teacher, or people that didn't know they could get past some of those barriers to try to become a teacher. And that's why I've got that in quotation marks, because sometimes we can focus on passive candidates who have information that falls into their lap through family or social media or word of mouth, and we can recruit amazing people to do amazing things. So with that said, I'm really going to talk about sort of the how to do the thing and what you might put on the recruitment thing. It's really important to consider your audience. And I know a big shift for the Kern Urban Teacher Residency has been a lot of our candidates in our partner IHE, so Cal State Bakersfield, are Gen Zs coming in. That's a large chunk of who it is that we're recruiting, or the pool of folks that we're looking at. It's not everybody. We've got second career folks and beyond. So we want to keep that clear. But a big piece of considering that audience is communicating through digital formats. We initially began with, and nothing wrong with, but the paper flyer, and those are still existing, and they live in our advisor's office, on our doors of our offices, wherever that is. We also have A-frames, or sandwich boards, if you will, that sit outside the education building or in different parts of campus because they are eye-catching. But we've grown into thinking, okay, how do I make that information quickly accessible? They can grab their phone and maybe capture a QR code. So really thinking about these updated versions of digital communication or ease of access to finding information. A big piece to our puzzle is making sure that our website, it's nothing fancy. You're seeing a screenshot of it on the phone here on the screen, but making sure that we're monitoring how many hits it's getting, that it's updated with information, that information is a click away type of thing. It's really important. And over the 7 years of Kern Urban Teacher Residency, if I start to type in Kern Urban, it'll pull up, it's the first Google hit that comes up because we get traction a lot of times through that website. So again, thinking about the OG tactics, flyers, A-frames, and then moving into how do I make that information really accessible? Flyers and A-frames, nothing wrong, but can I add a QR code to make the information super fingertip, quick access? How do they click a button and find someone to email or contact? So we almost want to be customer service related. We want to carve out the time and give, I'm constantly getting interest emails from the website hits. Hi, Holly, I need help, or I'm not sure about these exams, those types of questions. And I have to be ready and prepared. A lot of times I save emails because they ask the same questions and I can provide the same information. Word of mouth is big. Oh, sorry, still talking. Word of mouth is a big one. I know that we've had siblings and family members of people who work in the LEA or the IHE. So those pieces are big, and that comes with time. People didn't know who the heck Kern Urban Teacher Residency was in Kern County 7 years ago. But now that we've grown, there's that little scuttlebutt of like, oh, I've heard of that residency, or oh, I'd love to teach for BCSD. I've heard you have a pathway or a pipeline for resident teachers. Making sure our advisors and counselors at the IHE have that information, the correct information, or an easy way to access me, the coordinator. Again, easy access. So those are the big ideas for recruitment. I think the most important thing for a flyer or when they directly see that website is really the value proposition of why. Why would I want to be part of this residency? And how is it different from the traditional pathway? Of course, one of the biggest pieces for us is the stipend, right? So making sure that that value proposition is clearly articulated, whether it be on a flyer, an A-frame, social media, like how are we posting things and making sure that we're getting that information into the right hands. I think that's mostly the other layer is really knowing your institutional partners. Who is your IHE and who are those candidates that are coming to you, like I talked about in the very beginning. So considering that audience. Those are the big pieces of recruitment that I'll chat about just in regard to Kern Urban and how we're doing that. But there has been a huge shift to our Instagram presence and working through TikTok presence, but making things catch the eye of viewers, finding ways to get followers. That's how we're getting a lot of information on the website. I'm hearing, oh, I saw you guys on social media, so I wanted to reach out, that type of thing. So being really aware of that audience. The second bucket of information on the next slide that I will talk about is a little bit more of like the meat here. So we're recruiting, we want to capture this large pool of candidates, but then we really have to narrow in on how do we select the right candidates for this program. I love this picture. It's really one of our residents hugging all of her little tiny babies. This is pre-COVID, of course, but just such a cute picture because I think it shows the heart that we want to capture in these residents that we're recruiting. So we're going to talk right now about how do we identify the criteria that a candidate needs to possess when we're in the vetting process, and then what might the interview process look like. So I'm hoping some of this might on your second sticky note. So the first sticky note was talking, or your first T-chart was talking recruitment and any ideas that came up or things you noticed or wondered. Let's talk about selection criteria. And I'm hoping this will be one of the most helpful places if you're kind of working through what that might look like. So I think a really big piece before I talk about these sort of three spaces that we look into when we create or use selection criteria is reminding ourselves that the team that is coming together needs to be able to do some equity focused deep dive work on making sure that we're aware of and identifying our own implicit biases. I think that a lot of times questions that are asked might create biases that we're not even aware are happening. And it's something that we're still working through. And some of the documents that we're sharing with you today are totally in the works, whatever you want to call that. We're continually refining those because the questions may not be getting to the answer. We're actually trying to find that skill or trait through a lens of equity. So I want to make sure that that mindset of the team who's doing this work is really mindful of identifying their own implicit biases and making sure that when we come to the table, we're being objective and not being subjective. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. This first sort of idea of how to create selection criteria or identify it is a big one. So the eligibility requirements, which I had chatted with Gina about this in depth a little bit more. This is where a lot of barriers tend to initially surface for our candidates when they apply. And one of the biggest things that holds them back is exams and exam passage. in the breakout room, I was chatting with the ladies who presented before me and thinking about those subject matter waivers or things like that that are moving toward breaking down barriers so that people can enter the program without these hurdles that keep them from getting to us and becoming a teacher. So really trying to reduce barriers has been something that the Kern Urban Teacher Residency has focused on, because there are eligibility requirements. They have to come to the program. Our requirement is CBEST, CSETs, or the skills met some way or another. We've got, foundational or prerequisite classes that must be taken either in undergrad or post-bac. So there's things that come with them that we need to support before they get to us. So in that recruitment process, the LEA has done things like provide prep courses or reimbursement for prep for things like CBEST, CSET, and RECA. The university also has some prep options, but we want to open it up. So for example, our residents are given $100 to prep for an exam however they like. So they can show us a receipt for $50 or $107, whatever it is. They will reimburse, or the program reimburses up to $100 in prep for that exam. So that's one way we like to keep those sort of, think outside the box. They might have a prep that they prefer because we have learners with different needs. Another way the LEA alleviates some of that barrier is once you're in recruitment with Kern Urban, they will refund any cost for an exam that has to be taken, which alleviates that financial barrier. And then on the university or the IHE side, a big part of the puzzle, which I alluded to, were those basic skill requirement waivers or the subject matter competency waivers, which I know we have one specifically in our liberal studies department. And that's the biggest pool of candidates that we have coming into the multiple and single subject credential program where all of our residencies are housed. So I wanted to talk a little bit extra about those eligibility requirements and how to break down barriers that are the residents or the candidates, are going to face prior to even being in this interview process, right? They have to have all these things. So how do we eliminate barriers and get them here? The second place that you might consider selection criteria to live would be those dispositions. And I've got the picture of like the heart and the brain going on here. These are more of the characteristics and qualities that we want to find out if an individual has or has the ability to build capacity in those areas, right? There's kind of a joke that we'll say, "Ooh, we can fix like content, subject matter, like sort of the lack of understanding, but sometimes it's really difficult to do the heart work." Right? We try to teach empathy, we try to teach some of those things, but there really are some characteristics and qualities that we're looking for in these folks that we believe they need to possess to be successful in the program, or we believe they need to be able to grow to possess to be successful. The last area that we look at are skills and traits of the candidate. So how do we recruit a diverse cohort or group of people who are moving together through this program who can effectively serve those kiddos out in the classrooms in our partner district? So that is the big idea of sort of how we gathered selection criteria. But on the next slide, what I'm hoping is, with all of the words, this really busy slide was meant to be busy on purpose, because in order to identify the criteria that we want these candidates to have, there's so many moving parts, people's input, there's a lot of areas. So I really want everyone to think about what are the LEA or IHE priorities or initiatives. What are those things that would need to be included in that criteria to make sure that we are recruiting a diverse cohort? What are the demographics of the schools that you're serving? Are you serving Title I schools? Are you a consortium with multiple school districts that have different demographics being served? We need to know our CSTPs. I know those come after when you're in the field of teaching, but it's something we're working toward transitioning residents after the TPEs, right? They're sitting down here at the bottom. We're working on those during that pre-service time and then pushing them into the CSTPs as they transition into teacher of record. How do we diversify? Like, what is the diversification mode? Who do we need? What do our students look and sound like? What are the hiring needs? Do we even have any science jobs coming up next year? Are we recruiting candidates for that? Because we may not have a job for them. We will if it's science, let's be honest. But maybe there's not an art or a music classroom. And then your observation protocol. So for us, as an example, we use the Danielson clusters and the framework. So we use a lot of that terminology to frame this idea of criteria. And as an example, it would be a professional learner or building respect and rapport with your students. So those are types of criteria or qualities that we're looking for prior to them coming to us. I think something here, so I want you guys to think on your sticky note, if you have any thoughts of, oh, also I would need to think about these, bits of information from that resource or that tool or whatever that is for your context, thinking about where the criteria might come from. For us, this is mainly where we sat and pulled information from all and then tried to narrow it in to, okay, what are those non-negotiable skills, qualities, traits, dispositions that this candidate needs to possess or needs to possess the motivation to grow toward these things. Okay, so next slide. Let's think then, if this is the criteria, right? We have these pieces. I mean, you really do have some existing resources. I believe Jabron had shared earlier the sort of linked information resources. Our actual pieces of evidence are there for you to look at. Again, just one story, one lens, disclaimer. But let's talk about what the interview process might look like or what it looks like in our context. So interviews, we've got to have a rubric or something, right? A form of a rubric to stay objective and not to be subjective. We want it to be equity focused. And an easy way to do that is to have a rubric that guides you through the process so that it doesn't really feel like you're ranking folks, but you're just identifying qualities. Thank you, Jabron. I see your message that all the resources are living somewhere. Another piece that I haven't focused on a ton, and I meant to, was Gina had talked about, today we're focusing on the characteristics 1, 2, 5, 8. I'm a cheater and I work with them more often, so I might know them by heart, but I'm really thinking about 2, that authentic partnership right now and how you jointly facilitate all the moving parts of your residency. It's so important. Gina told you earlier a little anecdotal moment story about for Cuter, the rule is if there's 2 of the IHE side, we need 2 LEA members to support. So this really does hold true for interviews as well. So if me and department chair or me and my faculty for Kern Urban are going to be in that interview, I want to have my 2 LEA partners in the room too. We don't want to overwhelm and scare people, but how do we jointly facilitate? I'm definitely the one on the IHE side that's doing more of the if we have a Zoom link or if we need to, organizing the things in the background. But when it comes time to actually do interviews, we're doing the thing together. It's the same for mentor recruitment and interviewing as well. The big point is, how do I use strategic questioning, activities, grouping to get to the information I need? How do I pull out that really specific information about dispositions, characteristics, skills, motivation? How do we get there? By asking questions, by grouping. Then we're going to talk about the vetting and selection process. You're seeing a picture here of an interview process where they will do, it changes because, time changes, but this is like a STEM bag activity where they're put awkwardly into groups with people they've never met, but we like to put them in groups. So on the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about Kern Urban's actual process for interviews. The first is, for us, we humanize the process. You guys can probably tell I'm spicy, as my nieces call me. So there's a lot of energy happening, but I really want to lower that affective filter when the residents come to us to interview. We don't want it to be like the real dry HR, scary, we're trying to recruit people, but also I think part of breaking that ice is going to allow the candidates to show their real selves. And that's what we want to get to. We do the group project that I just alluded to. We often do like a little STEM bag activity. For example, there was popsicle sticks and some tape, and here's a heavy book. You need to build a bridge between this table and that table, and it has to hold the book's weight. And here are 4 people you've never met. Go forth and make a bridge. Kind of silly, but it really gets them laughing. And then there's individual Q&A. We got to ask questions to get to those answers. Sometimes we'll use a written response. It's been a Padlet before to sort of, again, lower that effective filter so that we're not asking for a full-on essay. But being creative, integrating ed tech, whatever that looks like. In the resources, there are examples of the actual questions that we use. Our break the ice question is, I love it. And if you want to steal it, steal it. But we ask them, typically we say, if you could be a piece of furniture or a strategy or a thing in a classroom, what would you be and why? And it sort of kicks off the whole thing and sets the mood or the tone to be a little bit like calmer and humanized. So it's a fun question to ask, but it also gets to the root of like classroom materials and what they know or what they lean toward enjoying. So that's really like the Kern urban view. As far as on the next slide, my hoped takeaways that you would get from this little session is market, promote, brand your program. We use our logo on everything, and that's a big piece of Kern Urban or Cuter is when we come together for anything, it's not the Bakersfield City logo, it's not the CSU Bakersfield logo, it's the Cuter, where is it? Oh my Lord, I'm not pointing the right way, forget it. It's the Kern Urban logo that you're seeing above my head. Individualize that approach. Who are you? Who's your audience? Are they mostly this or that? Can you reach Gen Zs a little bit easier with QR codes and maybe social media? Probably. Making sure the right people are at the table, gather the partners. Sometimes if you can do the 2 and 2 IHE LEA, it's a nice mix. But that joint facilitation really is super important to keep the shared vision and to keep the forward momentum in the program and the belief in the program. And then plan interviews that infuse those questions that are strategic, group your candidates, have activities, whatever that might look like, but make it fun, authentic, welcoming, because you want to get and pull out that really specific information that shows you dispositions and qualities that you might not be able to pull out with some mundane questions. So that is the end of my spiel, but hopefully you were able to take away some notices and wonders. And I'll pass the mic back to Gina, I believe, for Q&A.
Thank you, Holly. I always love listening to you speak. So Jacqueline and I will be hosting the Q&A. Are there any questions you might have? Please post them in the chat and we will ask Holly. We'll call it the Ask Holly Hour. I mean, 10 minutes, not hour.
Dang, I was like, that just grew a lot. Okay.
So I have a question for you, Holly. I think your process is beautiful. I love the different examples. I was curious to know if in the branding that you talked about here, the marketing, the promoting, do you find that you're getting a lot of diverse candidates? Is there one way that was more effective to bring in a resident of color versus another? Can you talk a little bit about that?
We're still working through a lot of what that looks like and how to recruit that diverse pool of candidates. We have my department chair at this point was actually faculty for Kern Urban from its get-go. So I say that because she's super gung-ho to support Cuter, but also the other residencies. And one of her pieces was, what if we go to the athletics department? Like maybe we're not reaching everyone and anyone to make sure they know that they can become a teacher, and we're going to break down those barriers for them. So we really are still working on how do we recruit people of all colors, ethnicities, sexual orientation. And I think a big piece of that for Cuter is some of the word of mouth. We've been able to be, I think, humanizing that our residency program is a big piece in making sure everyone feels welcomed, no matter what you look like or you don't look like or how you orient in certain ways. So a lot of our branding and promotion or the goal in our social media posts oftentimes is to be multicultural and to be open-minded and to be welcoming and accepting. And it tends to pull in a large or broad pool of diverse people who see our stuff and then come asking questions, even if they were a passive candidate originally. So I know it's not a perfect answer, but I do think that marketing and promotion is a big piece. And I saw a question specifically because social media is a big part. So beyond TikTok, where'd it go? Instagram is the most effective, if I'm honest. So besides having your website, easily accessible for your program. I think Instagram right now is the way to like reach. We'll make silly TikTok videos sometimes and post that, but really it's our Insta that is capturing the largest audience. We've even done like a grow the group. And right now, if you follow us, we have resident and mentor pairs who are doing Instagram takeovers. And this week we have a dual immersion class who's talking all about their multicultural lens in their classroom. Oh, Cindy, great question. I didn't talk about our context. We are a multiple subject focused program with opportunity for math or science single subject, and that's just the cuter bucket. But Bakersfield City Schools has 2 residencies with them, and one is brand new, and they are an ed specialist credential or SPED program. So we are not special ed program, but we have 2 residencies that are SPED focused. Did that help answer some of the questions coming?
I think so. I think the second part of that question was this idea of how maybe what you do to make your residency program more appealing as opposed to like an intern option.
Yeah, that comes big time with the value proposition of a lot of that is word of mouth too, because it is more days in the classroom, right? Like, let's be honest, it's more time, but the ability to walk away from Kern Urban Teacher Residency feeling like a second year teacher versus walking in as an intern and not knowing heads versus tails, or maybe just being in a traditional pathway and getting support and having a great program, but maybe not having that really deep dive. So coming away super qualified to do the thing, walking away as a completer in the program, knowing the culture of Bakersfield City School District is a huge component to the value proposition. Our residents want that bridge built, right? They want to know how to walk into the ed center or the district office and how to navigate that. Who's a superintendent? I've met him. Who are some of the principals? Oh my gosh, they want to hire me when I finish. Where are the schools located? What is the culture of BCSD? What reading assessments are used? Oh, don't worry, you're going to use those in your reading class. So I think the value proposition is the most important part. And of course, we've talked about the money. Walking away without debt is a really nice thing to have. So we're often talking about the stipend that we provide, but also there's so many other opportunities for grants. So you could also have a free credential or no debt while also, getting a living stipend.
Oh, nice. So then what you're saying is that, like, in addition to all of that great value proposition work, you have a decent stipend and you support them to kind of be able to go through that program debt free. Is that what you're trying to say?
That is exactly what I'm saying. Yes, it's 18 to 23,000 depending on which pathway. If they're multiple subject, it's 18,000, and it's 23 if they go into math or science, because we really need those folks. But there's other things like the aspiring teacher scholarships and residency grants. So they walk away debt free for sure. And then other folks walk away with, extra money to be able to live and not need to have another job to supplement their income to pay their rent or to feed their children.
Yes, absolutely. I could imagine, I think we can go more in depth later, but like Holly is one of the coaches for the Kern Teacher Residency Lab. So if people want to know more about how you work that magic, I mean, have to reach out. There were some other questions in the chat there around.
Okay, I will put our Instagram handle just so you guys can have it. And Cindy, the answer is yes to your question. We do have, it's like cuter@gmail or something of that nature, because we didn't want to have to use our personal email. So yes, create a Gmail. Competition from intern. Oh yeah. Yeah, the competition for intern, they see that money and they want to go, but you really have to build up that value proposition or find people to tell the story. Interning is very hard, right? And we want you to walk away qualified and not having tests or financial stuff that's holding you back. Golden State Grant and a large stipend from CTC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they shouldn't conflict, right? Okay.
No, they don't. And we'll talk about that at the end, all the grant opportunities available.
Yeah, I do know one tip or thought. We used to run our living stipend through university account, but we stopped doing that, and the district actually pays through their funding now because it alleviates some of the income coming through the university side for financial aid and grant reasons. And yes, it's taxed, but since it's 18,000, they probably want it to be by the end of the year so that they're not owing taxes.